Hello, good morning, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio. I'm coming to you remotely today. I am traveling. We're going to play some Willie Nelson for you later because I am on the road again. So one of the jokes they used to tell about him, if you wish to, you can attempt to. I'll tell you the joke first. How about that? And then before I distract myself with something else. The joke used to be, did you hear that Willie Nelson was dead? And people go, oh no, really? And you go, yeah, they found out he was playing on the road again. Terrible joke for a Tuesday morning. Sorry I didn't have a show yesterday. I was unprepared for the travel, and it didn't go with the cleanest of travel, and I'm hoping the sound is okay. It appears to be just fine, but I'm not listening to it at the same event. I wanted to talk a little bit yesterday about events that are going on. The Oreshnik strike that went on over the weekend in Kyiv, Russia retaliation for an event they have left completely unreported here in the West. They haven't even talked about it at all. And it is disgusting to me that they haven't. And they have invited journalists. I have a bit that I'm trying to finish, and I hope it ends up by the time we are halfway through the show. I want to. I watched. I listened to. I never had the opportunity to watch, but I was listening to it in headphones while doing some other things and traveling a little bit. And I listened to Maria Zakharova, who appeared on Solovyov last night, and they gave quite the critique, and I'm really trying to share that in its entirety with you. And it's highly frustrating that there are no reporters that will go and investigate this and will cover it the correct way. And so it's an open plea to Western journalists to come over and see what Kyiv has done. And that is a 16 to 18 drone strike on a school in a town in Russia. And they bombed this like a boarding trade school for pedagogisti, which are people studying to be teachers and stuff like that. And 14 to 18-year-olds living in dormitories, and they bombed the dormitories. And 16, several waves of bombs attacked this dormitory and killed. I believe the final number of killed was like 21, 22, and the total injured were like 28, 29 of the 80-something children that resided there, and their teachers, and blew them up, and they're under rubble, and it's a pretty big deal all over Russia, but they won't even report it. In the West, you don't hear anything about it, and so Russia's had this horrible Oreshnik strike that attacked Kyiv yesterday in Oreshnik, and I have plenty of news to discuss about that. And it's irritating to me, and I think my sound, I'm trying to do it without Bluetooth today. We're seeing how this works, if the sound comes out better, because the last couple of times I listened to myself on the road, the sound just seemed off a little bit. And of course it is. I'm not in a studio. It'll be off, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to share with you Nebenzya, which is, I believe his first name is Vasily, but it doesn't matter. But Nebenzya is the ambassador to the European Security Council or to the UN. He speaks to the UN on behalf of Russia, and he's pretty blunt and pretty straightforward. And I'm going to read to you his translated address. It's not very long, and he gave a short address, basically telling people. He said, Mr. President, he's talking to the whole thing, and there were some. I watched like a half an hour of this, and I was disgusted myself. Where they basically say Russia's faking, and this is all fake news and stuff, even on the Security Council, and so it's nonsense what they put out there, but they don't even talk about it. Just like here in America, we don't talk about the bombing of the Iranian girls' school in the first days of where they took out the elite school children of the school while they were taking out their parents too. They took out all the children, and so they killed several hundred, young girls in that school, teenagers, stuff like that. Same thing they've done in Russia, and I assume that for me, it just seems very convenient that OG Ukraine bombed a school when that's exactly what happened in Iran. That's for me. No, I don't believe in coincidence. Well, I shouldn't say that. I do, but it's pretty. You gotta you gotta convince me, and I remain unconvinced. And is all I'm saying. So Nebenzya, he says, Mr. President, I'm delighted with the knowledge of the Ukrainian passport in Russian history. Because they were talking about this idiotic passport issue in the history of Russia and how the Ukrainian passport actually showed something of Ukraine on it. It's idiotic. It's stupid. But they're trying to separate that Ukrainian as it hasn't been part of Russia for forever. They're still, that's far more important than talking about anything of substance. You got to talk about that. And so I'm delighted with the knowledge of the Ukrainian passport and Russian history, but with your permission, I will not engage in a dialogue with him because this is a senseless and useless activity. And it is. It's idiotic. I wanted to say something else. Frankly speaking, I am embarrassed and ashamed of my colleagues on the Security Council. We knew that we would hear something like this from the European Security Council member, but today their level of cynicism is overwhelming. None of them even bother to mention the dead children in Starobelsk. The representative of Denmark said they did not have access to the site to see it. Do you need access to the rubble, or will you claim that Russia did it, or that it is a result of computer graphics? You say you cannot independently confirm and are not sure that this is not staged, has not been staged. But even the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed that it hit Starobelsk. They actually took pride in it. They said they did it. They said that wasn't a school. That was a headquarters for some elite unit in Russia. I forget the name of the unit right now. But Ukraine said they did it. And they said, yeah, and they double tapped it too. They did it, waited until the first responders got there, and then did it again, and then did it a third time. And they did it a third time, total of 18 drones or so, and they destroyed the whole middle of it. The pictures are disgusting. And it says, these are not even hypocrisy or double standards, but a mockery of the child victims. We said in our speech that you have victims worthy of compassion and those who do not deserve it. Listening to you, to those present and absent members excuse me, of the European Union is an insult to the feelings of all who suffered, regardless of which country. How did we live up to the fact that the representatives of the European countries do not even consider the children of young students of Starobelsk, residents of Donbass, and in general, Russians as people? Because they don't. They just, they aren't even people. They're orcs, according to the Security Council and the Ukrainians. This, however, deprives the human face not of them, but of you sitting in this hall. You should be ashamed to bear what you are hearing now. After all, these are people dancing on the bones of the dead. This is all disgusting. I would be sincerely sorry for you, if not for your disgusting cynicism and regret over the memories of the dead. Thank you. And I wanted to share that with you because somebody at least is speaking up, but nobody ever listens. And that'll say something. Now, war is war, and there is horror stories in war everywhere, right? And but they, that was uh, Nebenzya in the Security Council talking about it, and Russia has taken a different approach after this, and they are, Vladimir Putin got on and gave quite the I don't know, speech and warning shot to Ukraine, and then they hit him over the weekend with Oreshnik. So the story is this uh, a retaliatory strike on Kyiv involving the Oreshniks, and so on May 22nd in Starobelsk, which is a section of Lugansk, it's a dormitory strike. The Russians vowed retaliation, and on May 23rd, there were U.S. and Ukrainian warnings. They sent all these. Sergei Lavrov sent to Marco Rubio. Told him to get people out of Kiev. We're going to bomb the crap out of it. You better get your people out of there. I don't mean to laugh about that, but he was pretty blunt. And so on May 24th, there was a mass Kyiv-region strike with the Oreshnik, and that was confirmed and reported by multiple sites. And it's over what was hit and whether it was military, civilian, dual use, what the Russians said is they were going to take out centers of decision making. So this is Russia's response, because Vladimir Putin got, and then he put a statement out saying that Starobelsk, Lugansk, that he was that they were coming. He asked all of the people and the military. He said, "I've asked them to provide me with options for strikes, and I want every option on the table." He was pissed. You can tell he was freaking pissed, and the people are pissed about it. And this wasn't an ordinary drone flight night on the 24th. It was a large combined Russian strike package with drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, even hypersonic, and at least one, although it looked to me like several from the videos that I saw, Oreshnik intermediate range hypersonic ballistic missile, and Russia says it hit military command sites, air bases, and Ukrainian defense enterprises in retaliation for Ukrainian strikes on the Russian school. Ukrainian and Western governments say the strike in Kyiv caused extensive civilian destruction, damage to residential buildings, schools, markets, water infrastructure, diplomatic property, and cultural sites. I watched Arestovich yesterday, Alexey, and he's the guy who wants to be president of Ukraine after. I doubt he'll ever make it, but he wants to be, and he talks about it. And he was connected with Zelensky and with the government for quite a while. I talked about him before, and he was given one and said he wouldn't be surprised if Russia took out the only water treatment facility in Kyiv. And he's like, he thought it would be all bombed. I've got some things to share from him as well, but both things can be true. That there was civilian structure. The Russians say, well, we hit this at night when nobody was there. They reported one death on some of in one of the buildings that Russia targeted because nobody's there at night. And so Russia says, even when we're targeting you, we don't try to kill innocents. You know what I mean? And I don't know that you can believe that or disbelieve that. It's not on me to say who's telling the truth there, but it's certainly the after listening to Zakharova yesterday and the pictures that they showed all weekend on all of this, and the interviews of children in hospitals that they were talking about. They were talking about the school. There's a mother there. Her boy was pulled out of the ruins, and they had to cut his leg off to get him out, and she was bawling and carrying on of course in the and you can't blame her, in the hospital while he laid there. And she's like, these are young kids and their dreams are ruined because of somebody wants to attack a college. And war, I mean, I get it. It's there are two sides to every story, and war sucks for them all. But there you have it. The Russian side starts with the attacks of talking about Kyiv afterward, and the responsive attack from Russia. They say that the attacks on Starobelsk Professional College, which is a teacher training college for teachers, pedagogisti is what they're called in the Lugansk People's Republic. RT says that Russia, and Maria Zakharova last night said that 21 people, 21 children were killed and 42 were injured, mostly teenage girls and trainee teachers, after the dorm was hit in multiple waves of drone strikes while students were sleeping inside. Putin described the strikes as deliberate and ordered Russia Defense Ministry to prepare retaliatory options. And Russia's position, as most of the time when these things occur, which are all too often on the Ukrainian side, is that this is a terrorist attack against civilian education facility with no military installations there or even nearby. And Ukraine says that the operation didn't target civilians and hit a Russian military drone-related facility. And Ukraine's ambassador to the UN called Moscow their accusation propaganda and said the operation targeted Russia's war machine. And that dispute, claims it's illegal, legal hinge, we're attacking this. It's a drone command unit. It's independent, verifiable evidence from Zakharova, and she's been inviting people over. Nobody's taking her up on it. She goes, "Where's BBC? Where's CNN?" And I hope to have that translated portion of her speech, because it was powerful, and she was on a tear, and frankly should have been. And the whole country is on a tear over there, and nobody's even listening over here, and they don't even talk about it. And, it's all Ukraine all the time, of course. We have to have blue and yellow flags painted on the back of our windows of our cars because we're idiots. That's what the U.S. has been pushing for 30 years. So we've been wrong for 30 years, but, there you have it. There were warnings. Ukrainskaya Pravda said that the U.S. embassy, for the attack on Kyiv, I'm talking about, because Russian air attack, they said 24 hours, and the U.S. citizens were advised to get out, to leave. The same report noted that Zelensky had U.S. intelligence, European partners, that Russia's going to use Oreshnik. He didn't need that. They said it all over Russia. They said, the Oreshnik will be used, and we're getting the options for that right now. And they were clear about it all over the news. They were saying, if you're in Kyiv, leave, because we're going to bomb the crap out of it. You can't blatantly bomb a school and with young children in it and not get a response. So the Zelensky in Ukraine had plenty of hours of warning, not minutes. They had the whole day beforehand, because the event of bombing the school was on Thursday, and they said, we're going to blow this up, and we're attacking Kyiv heavy. And they allowed senior officials, commanders, personnel, decision-making centers even to evacuate. And they said, we're going to hit decision-making centers. And so, it doesn't mean that they were emptied. There's still people in there, but they did give warning. So the strike was the largest strike in Kyiv since the beginning of the special military operation. It had hundreds of drones, many, many missiles. They had Kinjals, Kalibrs, Iskander, Zircon, and Sircon, and Oreshnik. And the Russian military, the defense, said it was a strike specifically in retaliation for the terrorist attack against civilian targets in Russia, which have been ongoing for months. And nobody says anything about it. They've bombed schools, swimming pools, for years this has been going on. It's all the Ukrainians have left, okay, is to send in. They're losing heavily on the battlefield. So the only thing they can do is the only thing the U.S. can do in Iran is bomb shit, right? And so you send out some waves of drones, you make sure to double tap them in the most visible of manner and kill as many civilians as possible, because that is how, and then you attack, just like Israel does. They attack the double tap. They wait until the rescue crews arrive, and then they bomb them too. And that's the way it's done in modern warfare, I suppose, today. And so we shouldn't be complaining about it, right? This is war. This is what we're supposed to do. I thought we were better than that. And, I really did. And that's, against the Geneva Convention, it really is. And it's against all sorts of international treaties. And nobody ever talks about it. But I guarantee you, if they did the same thing in Ukraine, it'd be all over the news here. And they tried it a couple of times, and most of the time it's a lie that they put it out there. They create their own news. Anyway, Ukraine's Air Force, as stated by the AP, they said there were 600 drone strikes, 90 air-to-sea and ground-launched missiles, and they said they destroyed about half on the way in. The Russians say they don't have any air defense left, and so when they shoot, they hit it. So AP reported that Oreshnik struck Bieletsverka, which is in the Kyiv-region, which isn't really downtown Kyiv itself, because they said that Oreshnik was used in the Kyiv-region, but they reported points that say they were hit military and military-industrial complex. And it says the Artyom military facility in Kyiv, which is on the outskirts of Kyiv, and it's a major Ukrainian military-industrial plant tied to air-to-air missiles, missile training, maintenance systems, anti-tank and aircraft equipment. So that's not yet been corroborated. Everybody hasn't put that out, said exactly what they hit, and they're still, coming up with whatever narrative the West is going to use, because this only happened on the 24th, Sunday. And so AP reports damage across Kyiv, government offices, residential buildings, a marketplace. They said there were two people killed and 83 wounded. The Guardian, which cites Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials, said that at least 4 were killed and 100 were injured, with damage to the water facility. The water, is what Arestovich was talking about, was saying that they should attack. He would think Russia would attack that because there's really only one in Kyiv. Residential buildings, schools, and other sites. But, civilian and military targets aren't really mutually exclusive in the war. A defense plant in Kyiv, it can be a lawful military target, but, still create lots of collateral damage. And so, the weapon in the Oreshnik and why it matters is because the Oreshnik is, according to all, including Western media, all media, it's an unstoppable hypersonic missile. And Russia hasn't used it very often. This is only the third time, possibly the fourth, that they have used it. The confirmed ones are when Russia says they come back, and the possible ones are when people claim it's out there. The AP and Guardian both say that Russia used Oreshnik in this tech, and it's the third known use of this weapon. And so it's some footage says the missile appeared slower than the last one, and it says you can't strategically defeat or realistically defeat the Oreshnik. They can't hit it. It's going too fast. And the multiple warhead scenario, they can't target them fast enough to get rid of them. So Ukraine can intercept some ballistic missiles with Patriot class, but it's obviously in this war, it's been quite discovered that air defenses aren't capable of keeping up with technology. They're years behind. And so that's the big deal. But this is much more of a deterrent, is what they're saying. Russia is saying we have less escalation tools, which are less than nuclear. The Oreshnik was designed to carry nuclear warheads, and the Russians haven't used nuclear warheads. There's a lot of discussion about that. One person said there was a report, but I haven't been able to confirm it, was that parts of the Ukrainian parliament, their Verkhovna Rada, was hit as well. But the speaker says that would take it with a huge grain of salt, because he doesn't believe that the Rada was hit himself. But he did say that there's reports all over Ukraine that they did hit the Verkhovna Rada. And that's the state capitol building, basically. And so I'm not so sure. I haven't been able to find any solid corroboration of that, that it was struck. So it could have been, but who knows? But Russia's official framing is, we're retaliating. You guys crossed the line. You keep striking civilian targets and you blow up schools, and you're pissing us off. If you want to stay in a war, stay in the war, but quit bombing civilian targets. On May 25th, I told you that Lavrov told Rubio that Russia was going to start systematic strikes on Kyiv, and the sites used for the needs of Ukraine's armed forces and decision making. And the Russian Foreign Ministry statement says the move has been in response to these continuing Ukrainian terror attacks. And RT followed up and said Lavrov warned Rubio of long-range strikes and repeated Russia's recommendation that foreigners evacuate Kyiv. And saying that Starobelsk, this school, is the last straw. And, Putin was clearly pissed, and he keeps his emotions, under wraps. He's not like the Trumpster or many other, American types. He generally doesn't, go off the rails, but he was pissed. He was clearly pissed when he was speaking. So Russia is saying this is like a possible new phase of pressure, especially during this year's counteroffensive. So Ukraine is saying that Russia is attacking Kyiv without provocations of any kind, and they just send a massive barrage, as usual, to kill civilians and damage civilian infrastructure, and use the Oreshnik as a terror weapon. And since they have the bully pulpit, they get to say what they like, And Zelensky says Kyiv is the target, that he was the target, and he called for consequences. The European condemnation by Macron, by Merz, by Kaja Kallas, and Kallas calling the use of Oreshnik is reckless nuclear brinksmanship, and wants to promise more discussion of more pressure. What are they up to? Sanction level number 23. You people need. There's talk of capitulation in Ukraine. There have been 5 or 6 Verkhovna Rada people come out and say, "Look, we just need to capitulate," and the talk is starting. And they just go, "Look, we need to capitulate. We don't have the forces. We don't have the people. We don't have the weapons. And what are we going to do? Continue to just send in drones?" The dispute over Starobelsk, separate but important. Russia is trying to turn it into a credibility test for the media, and rightly so. RT says that the Russian foreign, and me watching Zakharova yesterday, I'm telling you too, the Russian Foreign Ministry arranged a trip to the site for 50 journalists from 19 countries. And they say that BBC and CNN declined, and Japan blocked Japanese reporters from attending. And it's just same old stuff, that Russia's several times said, "Come and look at what they're doing," and nobody will go. And Western media refuses, avoids, or says they cannot safely, credibly participate under Russian organized conditions. And Russia says that, this is because they fear the truth. They don't want to come see it. And they all say it's a controlled propaganda tour. I tell you what, I'll fly over there, anytime. I'm tempted to do it now and go see it. It would be a useful to go and see it and go and talk to these people. I bet they'd let me interview some of the people over there and translate it. I sent away from my Russian. My new one, I had to get a new passport, so I should have that back anytime, and we shall see. But I don't know. The Russians are always this, it's always sequential strike, right? So a deadly strike on a dormitory and college facility in Starobelsk has been reported, but all across Russia, and nobody will pay attention to that. Russia talks about it inside the UN, inside all of its news, warns Lavrov, warns Rubio, they all talk about it, and then Putin orders a response. And the warnings are issued. Russia strikes what it describes as military command, air base centers, defense industry targets. And RT and Reuters both talk about this and the retaliation, but they don't say what was bombed. You don't even hear it over here. So if this defense enterprises like Artyom, those are legitimate wartime targets under ordinary law of war. And the facts that, some civilian buildings are damaged doesn't make the target unlawful like it does with a school, and bad intelligence. And but if your intelligence is, AI generated, you can't trust it. So this has been a pretty horrific event, no matter how you slice it. And ignoring it is just completely improper. I'm going to try to figure this out without destroying the sound quality whilst I figure out the next level of the song. Remember, I told you I was going to see if we could find Willie Nelson playing on the road again. And there we go. They found him playing on the road again. And, he looked pretty good back in those days. That song's been around for a very long time. And that was Mr. Willie Nelson. Let's see. I am in the process of, we've been discussing anyway, the airstrikes, and on this, I told you I watched some Arestovich yesterday, and Arestovich he's kind of a cynical dude. He says he calls it all political theater. Everything is theater. He talked quite a bit about Belarus, and trying to get Belarus into the Zelensky trying to get in. And basically, his core thesis is that Belarus pressure campaign, the Oreshnik strike, Starobelsk and Lugansk dormitory strikes, and wider escalation around Kyiv. Now, there have been reports that people are going, you know what? Screw this. We're just going to take Kyiv and be done with it. We'll take Kyiv and it's over. And there's been quite a bit of chatter about that on the Russian media. But according to Arestovich, they're all parts of one political military pressure cooker and pressure system. And we should take it all, with a grain of salt. And of course, he's a Ukrainian. This is a Ukrainian perspective, and so I do try to listen to him as well. And he's a little cynical because of the corruption and because of the Zelensky model, and he's no fan of Zelensky. And but according to what he says, they're all parts of just one military political thing. Zelensky, he said, needs distraction, and he needs another wave of domestic mobilization. He needs more people to join the military, and he don't have anybody left. And so Arestovich is always, excuse me, hostile to Zelensky personally, skeptical of Moscow too, and worried that both of them, are now trying to use Belarus. And he started with saying that who benefits the most if Belarus gets dragged into the war? And because he says that both of them are trying. He says that Russia has a clear military reason to generate pressure from Belarus. And I've been talking about that because Russia and Belarus are stationing troops right along the borders in northern Ukraine there, and to prevent and to make it easier to prevent Ukrainians from sending drones across the Belarus and Russian area. They have to go around and go through Poland and come into or through the Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia to get into get into St. Petersburg. And so Moscow can't add enough troops on that line because of the existing front. And so if you're trying to force Ukraine to remove forces from the eastern southern front and send them north to cover the Belarus border. So if they can get Belarus to border up on the north, then Ukraine will have to spend troops to cover the northern borders instead of ignoring Belarus, which they should do at their own peril anyway, because Russia is striking from inside of there as well. But Russia, he says that, Russia needs to get in there. He says, but Zelensky also benefits from Belarus. And this is the harshest, but this is where he says that Zelensky benefits from the Belarus threat because it gives him a new argument for mobilization. Look, he's threatening Kyiv, Rivne, Volyn, or other places like near Poland, and he can argue that Ukraine needs harsher mobilization. And it's a good way to silence his opponents, and it can distract everybody from corruption, because there's so many scandals. And then one of the most critical things he said, well, he calls it Mindichgate, that guy who stole all his money, and Arestovich and everybody else talks very bluntly about all the corruption going on. I'm surprised that YouTube lets him stay online. They get rid of anybody else who's critical of Zelensky, the old Z monster. But his view, he says, and he said it, he goes, Zelensky gets to play Churchill again, and everybody likes to try to, throw him into that. And his foreign policy, Zelensky's foreign policy behavior only serves his internal political needs first. Excuse me. He says Zelensky raises the stakes all the time. And then, does what the standard narcissist does. He just raises the stakes, and if a deal is not possible, he can, later he just blames somebody else and moves on and does it again. So that's his explanation for Zelensky, the not dealing normally with Lukashenko at all. And he sees that as a deliberate delegitimization of Lukashenko. He doesn't want to talk to him because Lukashenko is actually doing quite a good job of mediating between the West, Putin, China, Zelensky. Lukashenko doesn't want war in Ukraine. It's all it is escalation, and he doesn't want that escalation. So Arestovich's view of the Oreshnik strike in particular is that he says that Russia is now going to try to make Kyiv unlivable and push Kyiv, and he says this is not proof of trying to end the war quickly, but this is even more cold and more cynical. He says the strike is propaganda for Russian domestic audience and not decisive militarily. He says Russia can't easily mobilize another huge contingent of troops before the September elections. Russia can't guarantee major battlefield gains before then, although they're certainly churning along on the east side there. Ukrainian drones are hitting Russian civilian structures and refineries, more importantly, in Moscow. And, he's pretty blunt about it. He said Russia has to feed its domestic propaganda machine with an answer because they can't they can't not respond inside of Russia. They have to respond. So he I don't know. He says it's going to cost about $1 billion to fix everything that was blown up in Ukraine over the weekend. He says the death count was 2, and even on the propaganda claim that they're trying to kill civilians, Russians haven't done that. And he said it would, that's pretty expensive, $500 million. He said they spent $1 billion on this strike, and that 500 million a person. If they were really trying to kill someone, he doesn't want to spend high tech military equipment to kill a small number of people. If they really wanted to, they'd have put a nuclear warhead on it. Is basically what he was saying. And so he's pretty blunt. And here's what he worries about the most. He said, and this was interesting. He said that Kyiv has water sources, but the water treatment and the water sewage systems, they have multiple water sources because they sit on a river. So destroying water access would be difficult. But sewage treatment is far more vulnerable. He says, see, he raises the issue of the Oreshnik sewage treatment facility and saying he doesn't know whether it was hit. But he said a city can survive many things, but if the sewage treatment collapse in a multi-million person city during summer, the city will become unlivable very quickly. And the danger isn't just inconvenience, it's disease, sanitation collapses, and the degradation of urban life. So when he says Kyiv is going to be unfit for life, he isn't speaking about explosions. He's talking about sewer. And so that's the darkest part of his statement. I don't know. It was a pretty interesting and complete discussion that he tried to portray there. He didn't want to discount, but he didn't want to accept either the Russian statement that Starobelsk was, non-military. He doesn't like that, and he clearly doesn't like that Ukraine is using that. If they are using schools and young places where young people are taking education, there he really does have a problem with that. And he says he doesn't know the full facts, and he does acknowledge that these children are dead. And, he believes the Russian reports of what they're showing and all this stuff, just like I do, watching it on TV and seeing the interviews with the, people who've lost legs and limbs and children. He says that Ukrainian and international investigators, all favorable to Ukraine, say that there was a drone-related activity nearby. And so he says that Ukraine may have believed there was a military or drone-related target, and maybe there was one, but they didn't hit it. And because Kyiv said initially, "Oh no, it was a mistake. We hit only this, and we can't believe it." And then what he says he's 100% sure nobody deliberately aimed at children, and his view is that neither side spends expensive military equipment to kill children. He doesn't think people believe that. I'd take a more cynical view. I think people do that, and I think we do that, and I think we've done it in Iran. Either that we've helped it or we've given crappy information, unverified information to people, and we're still doing it. And you can't take this as even remotely accurate. Hell, half the time this stuff is AI generated targets, so it's crap. And but he does reject the idea that there's any high level strike planning trying to kill civilian children. He demands that Ukraine investigate because the dead are from Ukraine's legal standpoint. And this is important because they're firing inside of the Donbass. He claims these are Ukrainian citizens. And so they're bombing in the Donbass, hitting Starobelsk education center, a Ukrainian education center, if you believe that the Donbass is Ukrainian. And that's a major point. He says normal state open criminal cases when civilians die, and they do it even against their own military. So if some Ukrainian is killing Ukrainians inside, which they should have been doing since 2014, then they should be taking it seriously, and they never do. And so he wants to know who made the decision, evaluate whether the decision was lawful, and punish those who made the mistake. And he says that Ukraine is going to bury the issue under the war, writes off everything. You're just allowed to do it. Sorry, that's how it goes. And this is useful analysis. And, and he says that these Russian strikes on Kyiv are actually helpful to the Green Goblin. He gets to say that, it takes his focus away from all this corruption and the scandal. And that's definitely true. And, Zelensky is always on, always on the take for more money. He wants that more money all the time. He's always out with his hand out somewhere. And he is again. He has been now. He's out doing it again. And he's particularly critical of Lukashenko because Lukashenko in Belarus is trying to settle this. But no. Zelensky can't have that. If Lukashenko is Churchill, then he's not, right? I'm extremely cynical about this. The Green Goblin. Sorry about that. I'll try to tone that down a little bit for those who love the Green Goblin, because there are plenty of those around too. But that guy's not very lovable. He's not like Cheburashka or any of those. He's could you imagine? We should do a Zelensky as Cheburashka segment. Maybe we could do that. Maybe that would be the way to go. Hey, so you know what I'm going to do? I have one more little segment, but because I'm remote, it's a little more difficult to get to. So I'm going to keep the tunes coming and play for you another popular sort of rockabilly, kind of like On the Road Again in my humble view, but it's not really, but it's similar. Ready? Here we go. Leonard Skinner's Sweet Home, Alabama.
1, 2, 3.
And that is the name of that tune. That was Leonard Skinner, of course, Sweet Home, Alabama. And I am Samuel Trapp, continuing here. I told you I was going to share with you, and frankly, I think it's important to do so. Nobody ever does, and nobody ever includes important matters here. So think about this. I told you about watching Solovyov on Sundays. And this Sunday was no exception. I put in there, and like I told you last week, Margarita Simonyan has returned, and from her cancer treatment, her husband passed away. She's had a bad year. And but I do like listening to her. She's U.S. educated. Her English is better than mine, probably, and she is very well spoken, and in Russian and in English. And she spoke on. He let her talk for a while last night, and they put some. He let her go on for a while, and I think it's because she hasn't been around in a while. That she's been out of the country, and she always talks about poetry. And she is somewhat emotional, when she talks about it, and so she'll put out these poetry things, and kind of give a feminine touch to it. And I'm mentioning that feminine thing twice because most of the time on Solovyov Live, these people are mostly male. They tried to put a couple of women that might be able to replace Margarita Simonyan, but they haven't been very effective. They just, it's not the same. This woman is very well spoken and very popular. And she's also very clear when she speaks, and that for me makes it a lot more profitable to watch her than people who don't open their mouths to enunciate when they speak. That drives me a little crazy. Like I have a serious issue. Sometimes I have to listen to him twice to make sure to get it all with Arestovich. Arestovich mumbles and he doesn't open his mouth when he speaks, and he just you can't hear what he's saying. It drives me nuts when people they can't clearly articulate in any language, Russian or English. And I try to be, I often joke that I'm illiterate in two languages, but actually people told me I'm somewhat literate and articulate in both, and that I tried to say things in Russian that people will understand them. Anyway, Maria Zakharova and Margarita Simonyan both were on the Solovyov on Sunday night. And Margarita Simonyan talked about quite a few topics. And one of the interesting parts of what she said on the current stage of the war and comparing it to 1941, she says, you are here from 0 to 10. We're already at the point in the song written overnight on, June 22nd, 1941. And she talked about Lebedev Kumakin and what his words were. We shall resist the stranglers of all fiery ideas. It's violators, it's robbers, tormentors of people. She said it's as if it was written right now. She goes, do you remember what this is from? And it says, and she's very poetic, so I think it's fun to include this stuff in there. And she says, arise, great country, arise for mortal battle against the dark fascist forces, against the cursed horde. Let noble rage boil like a wave. The people's war is underway, our sacred war. And she says, one might say she says this afterwards, she goes, one might say Ukraine is too small for a sacred war, but we are not waging war against Ukraine. I will never tire of repeating this. The war with Ukraine ended on February 28, 2022, 6 days after the special military operation began. That was indeed like a small operation like Georgia. That ended. They were ready to give everything away to accept any conditions. Then this red-haired dog arrived, for some reason, with the Russian name of Boris. She's talking about Bojo, Boris Johnson, and said, brother, all of Europe will fight Russia for you. With your hands, we promise you, all of Europe would fight, but through you. And now we've been fighting all of Europe for the 5th year running. So this is a sacred war for us. And she says, absolutely, arise, great country. So, and she says they're preparing many surprises for us in other regions, just like the fascists did, trying to persuade Japan to open an eastern front. I hadn't heard that before. Japan, how shall I put it politely, soiled itself. And that was very helpful to us in 41, because they were able to redeploy full-strength Siberian divisions to Moscow. The Battle of Moscow was not entirely determined, but in large extent it was. And why did Japan get scared? Anyway, she's talking history. It was pretty good stuff. And she went on for a while. But more importantly, she talked a little bit about AfD, RT, democracy, and force. And she said the strongest part of Germany gave an interview recently and said, are they out of their minds banning RT, the television, her channel? How does democracy work? The strongest party in Germany is against banning RT. The German people are against banning RT and against their own German leadership. And she said, that what is the support of what the leadership is? 16%. They don't have any support anymore. And she went on that topic for a while. And she talked about, he let her speak for a while because, it's only the second time she's been back. But he was more talking about escalation, the continued war. And when he brought in Zakharova, and this is the important part, and I'm going to share with you pretty much everything that she said. and it's not. It'll take me a little while to go through it. Will probably be the last thing that we're ending with on what Zakharova put out on this show, and I think this needs to be shared in English. And so I've done a pretty good translation of this, and I'm going to share it with you. But I watched it as well, and I watched what she was saying, and she was. There were people in the area that were watching me, and one person said, "Man, she's pissed off because she's speaking Russian, and this person didn't understand Russian. Man, she's really pissed off." And I was like, "Yeah, she is, and rightly so. But she's pissed off for a reason, and here's what it is." And so he invites her on, and I'm going to share most of what she said to you in kind of I'll skip parts, but I will. I'm going to share with you what her appeal was to foreign journalists. Right? She says, "Yes, to your entire studio and guests, and you have multi-millions in your audience, and that's true." He said, "A group of journalists is now in the region." She's talking about Starobelsk. And she goes, "I'm going to tell you how it happened step by step. We remained in Moscow. My colleagues, employees of the department, are accompanying these journalists. We did it this way so there would truly be more seats available. Everyone among the foreign correspondents that expressed a desire to go received the opportunity to go." And she works with the Ministry of Defense. So she said, "Our task was to make sure that the world community sees this through the eyes of its own journalists, and I will explain why. I think you've spoken about this a great deal today and in recent days, and I know you have drawn attention to the tragedy. And briefly, it is monstrous. And at the moment of the strike, there were 86 people in this educational institution. They were minors aged 14 to 18 years old." Immediately on May the 22nd, at Russia's request, the UN Security Council was convened. I want to say that these Security Council meetings are broadcast live, but usually, because of the time difference, they fall during the night in Moscow. Most of our country is already asleep and later watches recordings. I want to say the Security Council meeting was exceptional because I received hundreds of calls and messages the next day saying, "What are they saying?" And this referred to the Western representatives. "We've heard many fakes and much disinformation over all the years, but both our citizens and foreigners were struck by the cold-blooded, indifferent, and false narratives which they spoke at the UN Security Council table about supposedly no strike having occurred, about Moscow inventing everything, about no one striking children, and about there supposedly being no victims at all." That's true, by the way. But the particular cynicism of the situation was that these words were spoken by women representing Western countries. It's not only cynical because these Western countries speak about human rights, but because women were saying this. I want to say that my phone was exploding. Journalists and public figures were calling me saying, "How is this possible?" And when the permanent representative of Latvia at the UN is speaking, I realize something. I could never understand before how women could work in the children's concentration camp at Salaspils. She's talking World War II. We have read and spoken a lot about these things. That was the camp, the place where children's blood was taken, where children were killed so their blood could be used for the soldiers of the Third Reich. And admittedly, for many years, the Baltic countries claimed that this was a children's health camp. But in reality, it was a camp where they experimented and conducted experiments on living children, on small children, and blood was taken from them to give to the soldiers of the Third Reich. I did not know what the women who did that could have looked like or how they could have felt, but when I looked at Latvia's permanent representative at the Security Council, I understood. Now that's freaking cold. That is cold, and it's part of the reason I wanted to share it with you. And she goes, "And what is most astonishing is that this Bacillus is still alive, just as in those same places, in that same Latvia, women have been found who could take blood from children, understanding these children were dying, and simply cart them off to pits and bury them. So too now they do in principle the same thing, only while occupying high posts. Today the list was published. 21 children were killed, 42 were wounded. After the blasphemous Security Council meeting, made blasphemous by the Western representatives, we literally the same night formed a group of journalists, those accredited in Moscow, who did not need to fly in from abroad. Moreover, there are no direct flights from Western countries now anyway. They have canceled them. So we assembled a group. This group included 51 foreign correspondents, 51 journalists from 19 countries flew out this morning and are working there. They're walking through the remaining corridors. They are seeing traces of children's bloody handprints on the walls of the destroyed educational institution. I do not know whether their editorial offices will allow them to do so, but I believe that perhaps not all of them, but some of them, will be permitted to present these reports for the judgment of their own viewers. Countries from all continents have been represented. There are journalists from France, Germany, and the United States. There are British journalists. There are, of course, journalists from other areas of the world majority. China, Venezuela, Cuba. There are Arabic journalists from various countries in that region. We have done everything so the world would know the truth. And she says, I want to say one more thing. They are accompanied by the Human Rights Commissioner, Yana Lantratova. Representatives of the local administration and investigative committee and rescuers are speaking with them. We have done everything so that, and I don't know how this will happen and how much strength the parents of the killed and wounded children will need, but we've done everything so the journalists would have this opportunity. And now I will say what needs to be said. All of this has an intentional legal component, and that very intentional legal foundation was created by those same Westerners. First and foremost, they talk about human rights and children's rights. Look at the Convention on the Rights of Children. That is exactly what it is called. It is developed, by the way, in an international treaty adopted by the General Assembly on November 20, 1989, and entered into force in 1990. It's the most universal document regulating this sphere. The entire world signed this document, including Ukraine, that is now striking these children, and they are aware that they have obligations to the international community. I want to quote Article 38 of this document. It establishes that states parties undertake to respect the norms of international humanitarian law, and then the list follows. But most importantly, paragraph 4 states, in a direct quote, in accordance with their obligation under international humanitarian law to protect civilian population in armed conflicts, state parties have take all measures to ensure protection and care of children affected by an armed conflict. This means that countries caught in the raging flames of conflict must do everything both to protect children and provide them with primary assistance. But not only the General Assembly, and of course that document has a recommendatory character, but also the Security Council has developed a whole series of documents on this very issue. Resolution 1261 in 1999 concerns children's issues. It is called Children in Armed Conflict. It designates 6 grave violations against children: killing and maiming, the use of children as combatants, sexual violence, abduction, attacks on schools and hospitals, and denial of humanitarian access. That is exactly what the armed forces of Ukraine and the Kyiv-region and Banderovцы are now doing. Banderovцы are Banderites, is what they call the Nazis over there. But the most relevant document in this context of what we are seeing is, of course, Security Council Resolution 2601. Believe it or not, It was adopted by consensus in October of 2021. It speaks precisely about these points. Allow me to read it. Paragraph 2 strongly condemns continuing attacks and threats of attacks in violation of international humanitarian law against schools and civilians associated with schools, including children, teachers, and so on, calling on the parties. Who do you think developed this resolution? I will list them for you. Britain, Greece, Denmark, France, and now a big drum roll, Ukraine. Can you imagine such hellish hypocrisy? First and under the very spotlight and camera of the whole world, because the entire world really does watch Security Council meetings, and I watch them, so it's kind of funny. They pretend to care so much about children, and then they do exactly the opposite of their own obligations. She was pretty rough on them. There are two more important documents. The Security Council regulates the issue of arms supplies to regions where children suffer from armed conflict. Resolution 1261, adopted in 1999 by consensus, recognizes the harmful effect of proliferation of weapons, particularly small arms, on the security of civilian populations, especially children. In that connection, it refers to Resolution 1209 of 1998 that emphasizes the importance of all states involved in the production and sale of weapons that could provoke or prolong armed conflict. Can you imagine? And no one at the Security Council on May 22, 2026, among Western representatives said they are directly responsible or guilty for what is happening because they sponsor the Kyiv regime and supply the weapons with which these children are being killed. Our children, and there are no other people's children. And what else do I want to say about this? Each of these resolutions, each mechanism, whether of the General Assembly, the Security Council, or the UN Secretariat as a whole, has monitoring mechanisms. What does that mean? Special reporters, commissioners, all kinds of secretaries and responsible officials who either have representation on the ground in certain countries or are delegated there to understand what is happening and how it violates the relevant documents or implements them. What is the problem? The problem is that even when representatives of international organizations, in particular the UN, want to come and record the relevant violations, not just violations, but tragedies, they cannot do so. Why? Because the Kyiv regime says this can only be done from its territory, as you understand, and they do not provide passage, access, or flights. They gather groups and take them only where their staged events have taken place, in order to make all these officials of international organizations kneel to them and give them more money, I say. But I want to say it again. We will do everything possible so that this information reaches the international community. There are so-called refusers. I want everyone to know about them. The BBC officially refuses to go to Starobelsk. They sent us an official letter stating that they would not go, not for any technical reason, because it was their principled position. CNN said all of its reporters were on vacation. Japanese journalists were forbidden by official Tokyo channels. You know, I want to say that my question is not that they are here taking interviews and engaging in journalistic activity, but I have two questions. First, are they not only engaged in journalistic activity, or are they engaged in propaganda, distortion of information, or collection of sensitive data? But the second question that constantly troubles me is this: on what basis, when attending official events as journalists, where they have the right and the duty to ask questions, do they act as if they are lecturing us? Look at how BBC representatives formulate their questions. Are they even questions? They're always judging. It is as though they are the heads of tribunals reading out accusations against us. No, it is not for them to accuse us. It is we who accuse them of betraying journalism itself. And now also betraying children who are being killed with money supplied by their own governments and weapons supplied by their own governments. So when Solovyov says Russian journalists are not allowed in Western leaders' press events, she says, we are not allowed there at all. Vladimir Rodolfovich. She says, we're not allowed into the palaces of Alsace, Champs-Élysées either in France, she's talking about. So I wanted to share with you her commentary because, man, she was harsh, and I've provided it all. And you won't, people they don't provide it in the United States. You don't get the information, well, anywhere, really. And you could say that there's certainly a level of, I don't want to call it propaganda, but because she was speaking, straight up. And the reason that I watch these 3-hour long shows, and by the way, Zakharova every Thursday gives it, or Thursday or Friday, it depends on when it comes out. I'm not sure the official day that she actually gives it, but it comes out on YouTube once a week and late in the week. And I try to watch, parts of it, at least her opening statement in there, because she gives a set of current events and all the important stuff will show up in the first half hour or so. And so when I'm driving or something, Zakharova will be telling her stories, and when I find the good ones, well, not that they're not all good, but it's all straight from the horse's mouth, or from the whatever you want to call it. It'd be our equivalent to Marco Rubio's press secretary, or the White House press secretary. That's the equivalent, and so she's the press secretary for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with Lavrov. And so she's always present, and when it's a big deal for Lavrov, she'll travel with him and stuff like that. But she also does her own brief, and she's pretty critical and very well spoken. And so it's and that's typical. These are our diplomatic level people, and so they do talk in some of the harshest means against what the West has been doing in Ukraine, against what's going on in Iran and this current stuff. But on a bigger picture, I talk about people tiring of this war and of the lies that are continually spewed out worldwide, really. And everybody is critical and can be critical of their own and everyone else's government. I mean, if you are living in America and you believe everything our government says, well, you're part of the problem, all right? It'd be nice if you could believe these a-holes, but you can't. And that is the unfortunate truth. You can't believe, never trust a politician. He's selling you something. He's just like a used car salesman, This car was driven by, a little old lady, once a week to go to the grocery store, and she didn't drive it much else besides that. Well, yeah, maybe that's true, but it doesn't say what happened the other 6 days with that vehicle driven by her grandson going out behind somewhere, or doing whatever. So there are shades of truth or facts left out, and you can't just believe what you are told. And I hate to say it to the Trump lovers out there, but a Trump government is no different than any other government, in my humble view, although it's more likely to get a realistic approach, that's for sure. And I trust individually, I would trust Trump far more than Biden on an individual level. But in the government level, they're all a bunch of liars and crooks, and whether they work for Trump or not. So the problem isn't the Trumpster. The problem is all the idiots that work for him, because they're the same idiots that work for everybody else, and it's getting worse. And I watched another complete set of lies and I can't stand watching him anymore. He just, I can hardly bear it. If you put me on coach there, put me in coach, Hegseth, you put him out there, put me in coach. I got this covered. Let's go bomb the hell out of everybody. We got everything is positive. Yeah. Real positive. I wouldn't follow that guy into a bowling alley. to take over I wouldn't, that guy, never in a million years would I follow that guy anywhere. And unfortunately, as a military person, that's where I would have serious problems, is following a guy like that. You cannot trust a word that guy says. And if you do so at your own peril, is what I say. And you don't have to believe that, but there's just something not right about that guy. And he should have stuck with being a TV pundit, because he was, funny enough to pull that off. But I don't want some funny dude, some JV quarterback funny guy running the war machine. You know, I can't help but think that he's part of the reason we switched it to the Department of War, because he wanted to be all powerful. Oh, geez, I got this Department of War. What are we talking about? Defense? It's like the idiots in the police department saying we're not police, we're law enforcement. They focus on the enforcement all the time. They don't focus upon what their job is: policing, administration, taking care of things. They talk about enforcement. That's it. Go out and arrest somebody. That means you're doing your job, right? Oh, that's what it is. So if you're in the Department of Defense, you're defending things, right? There's stuff you can defend, but by God, if you can be in the Department of War, well, you're far better off, aren't you? You can conduct war with the Department of War, even if you're not conducting war. You don't need war powers relief. You don't need any of that. Screw it. We're the Department of War. What else do? We go out and kidnap foreign leaders, bring them to justice in America. Yeah. Good old misnomer. That doesn't work, does it? At any rate, I've been rambling, but I have finished my my base topic there, and I think there, it did give me a little bit of time, and I said if I had a little bit more time, I'd go back to Margarita and tell you what she said on a couple other topics, because she said, especially on Starobelsk, because what she said, and that's all that Maria Zakharova talked about, but she said that she gave some religious text at first, and then she talked about this same disgusting Danish woman. She says, we don't know anything because the Russians always lie to us, is what she says. And so not Zakharova, we already heard about Zakharova, this Simonyan, she goes, oh, we don't know anything because they don't have the ability to know because they haven't been there. And conveniently, they secured that inability for themselves in advance, preventatively, when they banned RT and other Russian channels. That is all. Nobody shows anything from us anymore. The BBC refuses to go. CNN said they were on vacation. Moscow bureau of CNN is on vacation. Even, unfortunately, from the Arab world, some journalists who were invited refused to go. But why get involved? My house is on the edge. I know nothing. In the literal sense of this phrase, people prefer not to know. But in China, hundreds of millions have viewed what happened in Starobelsk. I already publicly expressed my condolences on social media, and now I express them again on television, on your show, and of course to everyone who was killed. And if anyone needs anything, treatment, any kind of help, please write on social media, and we will do everything we can to help. So they conveniently do not know about this because they don't wish to, just that they do not report about the girls in Iran. And you should see what is happening in Ukrainian media right now. Ukrainian media is insisting that generals were sitting there in this school, in this headquarters, and that's true. That what the Ukrainians are saying anyway, that this was some kind of military headquarters, and all the videos have already been put out. Yana Lantratova, our human rights commissioner, Yana is doing excellent work. She is there now, showing fragments of the UAVs, speaking with relatives of people who died, and with survivors who were wounded. And you can see these are children, youth, teenagers. It's very visible. They say that Ukrainians say that it's a general and an operational headquarters. What can anybody say? Many Ukrainian channels writing on this are called, and I didn't know this word, and I still don't, but they call themselves trucha, which it's justify. They're trying to justify the name of a powerful strike, and this is a powerful strike weapon. And the colleagues here know it better, but perhaps almost since the beginning, one of the most powerful strikes since the beginning of the special military operation. And they're talking about the strikes on Ukraine that were taking place on Sunday during the day. And she says, because there is no other way, because they don't listen in any other way. If there was something else to hit with, she says, I'm not a specialist on this either, but I know that this needs to be taken very seriously. So, at any rate, I am going to end the show on that note. And I very much appreciate you being here on International Flavor today. Invite you into the studio every morning, coming to you live from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio. Today a little bit farther remote than that because I'm on the road again. And tomorrow will also be on the road again. And hopefully, and I'll review the sound and make sure everything came out all right. If I have to adjust, I'll adjust tomorrow because I can't do both at the same time remotely. So I apologize if the sound wasn't as clear as it normally is in our wonderful studio. And I'll be traveling most of this week, so I will keep you posted on my whereabouts and on the news of the day. And certainly, if you don't know anything about this Starobelsk, you should look into it. This is a real tragedy and unfortunate, and people in the West should pay attention to this, and they never do. And so I'll go ahead and put it out on my channel here at International Flavor, where the truth just tastes better. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you all have a very good evening or day, I suppose it would be, in mid-Missouri, but I'm not in mid-Missouri today. But I'm going to, what would we call this? We call this tapping out. Well, we'll tap out a minute early today. Have a very nice day.